firstly, just for folks who might not be super familiar or aware of what Friends with Benefits is, I think, on its outset, it might look and feel like any other sort of internet community or internet community that many different folks are part of. But I think from day one, we've always viewed it as something a little bit more unique and sort of special in that we really think of FWB as like a collective intelligence network. It's this sort of group of folks from all different cultural industries and backgrounds and perspectives who, have gathered and convened around a shared interest for where the internet is going and how the role that sort of crypto and Web3 plays in that. I think what was novel in sort of the inception of it, which Trevor McFrederick started about 2.5, 3 years ago, was this idea of what does shared value look like in sort of internet native communities and online networks. This idea that we're all gathering, all of us have participated in various different communities and forums and in digital environments since we were old enough to hang out on computers, and really interested in how that value, that sort of value and input we bring to these networks, what are ways to meaningfully reward and incentivize those networks to collaborate and create things together. Over the course of a weekend, as crypto and ERC20 specifically started to evolve, Trevor created the FWB token as a way to sort of enumerate and sort of incentivize and distribute that value to the holders and participants in that network, which at the time was a Discord channel. The Discord channel was 20 people, 30 people, grew into 100, 200, 500, 1,000, to where it is now about 4,000, 5,000 members who hold the FWB token and participate in an entire ecosystem that sort of blossomed out of this shared desire of creating a better internet and new digital spaces for our community. And from that, there's been hundreds of events organized all over the world by community members, to our own social networking platform, to editorial and content. And it's all really exciting because it's bottoms up and it's playing with this idea of, can users or contributors of a network create sort of the value and the contents that then the rest of the network is able to sort of like engage in, sort of this like headless brand creation that we've all been really interested in sort of studying. And our sort of biggest project and undertaking, after throwing these hundreds of various different events and, millions and millions of connectivity points formed over FWB's history, is what does that look like in a much more concentrated environment over the course of 3 days in a physical location. I think with the rise of all these conversations around network states and these ideas of like values aligned physical congregations, we're really interested in like, what do temporary network states look like? And so I think it's safe to say that we might be one of the first festivals or convenings that has emerged entirely from an internet native sort of group and a DAO that is now producing sort of an annual event series using its own cultural currency to sort of bring together the best in class performances, lectures, talks, experiences as a way to really create that annual mass gathering for all the touch points of the FWB ecosystem to come together, celebrate, learn, share, and continue to define what FWB is or isn't. And I'll pass it over to either Paul, who's leading all the operations behind the event, and Nick KD, who's leading a lot of the programming and the talks and sort of the content behind the event, to maybe, share their perspective or take sort of the next question.
Yeah, it's probably also worth mentioning, when you're talking about the sort of origins of FWB, Alex, that was end of 2020. Everybody was very much still at home, trapped in their bedrooms, on their computers. The Discord was on fire. Several people are typing energy all the time. And as sort of the world, I guess, defrosted a little bit in towards the end of 2021 and into 2022, I think, to borrow FWB member David Rudnick's phrasing, we were all kind of trying to balance this idea of he has this concept of physical and digital prime, and that up until probably 10 years ago, most of us valued things that happened to us physically much more than we valued things that happened to us digitally. And perhaps people like Gen Zers understand digital prime a lot better than some of us do. But I think as we started to thaw back into the real world, we started to realize digital experiences are super valuable. And how do you balance a digital and a physical prime sort of value proposition? So I think that Fest is a really interesting, probably right at that crossroads of, I think, again, not to keep name dropping FWB members, but Yancey Strickler last year after Fest said he felt like it was like, I forget the phrase he used, like internet summer camp or something. He was like, everybody on the internet was here. And what does that mean? Like, but I think it all resonated with us who were there. And it felt like that. It felt like Twitter feeds IRL.
I'm curious what you left with last year, guys. Like, I can share what I left with, but like last year, I feel like there was like a collective high of like 2 to 3 weeks. Like, what comprised of that high?
I mean,
I think for me, it was like when so much of your life is online. And then I think for a lot of us, like let's say our IRL friends don't necessarily get it or don't necessarily understand what we do, or they're kind of like, oh, cool, like you're doing something with crypto, cool. Or like, you know what I mean? There's a lot of that kind of stuff, and not in like a negative way, but it's, you know, I don't want to bore half my friends sometimes by going into some like diatribe about this or that. And so it's like there's certain times when this kind of stuff can be a little bit compartmentalized. It was really incredible coming out of Fest last year to like get reminded that there's a ton of other really incredible people who feel the same way and who are building and are working and doing all this kind of stuff that are, even though I talk to them on Slack and Discord and email all the time, it just feels more real when you see them in person. And I think also I think one of the highlights of it was the fact that a lot of the folks who I met or who I've talked to but hadn't met in real life, and anyone's like, oh, cool, like you're like the kind of person I would legitimately be friends with on a normal level anyways. And it just felt, it was the kind of thing where everything was kind of like, you know, rolling. And I was like, okay, cool. Like it's sometimes you feel a little alone doing some of this stuff. And it's like, okay, it's not that alone. Like you see all these other incredible people who you find out are your friends are friends and friends are friends of friends. And they're all like, everyone knows each other and everyone is just kind of like building together. So I think it was just really kind of rediscovering and strengthening kind of the community aspect of it for me was really important. I mean, I think of course like I like learned a lot of stuff in the talks, and it was really just like great to like try and like galaxy brain out some ideas and stuff like that with people. And there's like that was always going to happen. But I think the biggest takeaway for me was just kind of like, okay, cool, like this is like a legitimate, real, you know, I don't want to call it a movement because that sounds a little like, you know, grandiose, but I think it's just kind of it feels awesome to kind of be reminded that there's all these other people who are doing the same thing, and it's more than just like a name on the screen.
About our financial system.